If I could respond to that, I guess you're lucky if you had the secretary here, because where he goes, money follows, right?
Well, you know, I got to share with you. I sat right by the guy, and I took every advantage that I possibly could for our little old city here in Moscow. And the neat thing about Anthony Fox is he was a former mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Right.
And so some of the things, that's at a bigger scale than what we are here in Moscow, but you know, it's the same. You have similar problems whether it's a smaller community or bigger community. So you never know about how that will work out for us. But that may be something that could trigger some things for us. And I'm sure hopeful for that.
Just one other point to follow up on that, Mayor. You know, I think one of the things we're seeing around the country now is that with the decline of earmarking and, you know, federal transportation funding going down, cities are relying more and more on grant sources to fund transportation projects. And if you want to write a grant these days, if you don't have a good plan to back it up, you're in big trouble.
Well, you know, and I don't want to get too, you know, taking a thunder away, but he talked about a bipartisan bill with both sides of the party, a $300 billion one, and we need it for infrastructure in this country, whether it be roads or bridges, various highways, streets. And a lot of it has to do with the gas taxes. We build all these cars that get much better gas mileage, and so the gas tax money coming in is less than what it used to be at one time. And so there's got to be ways of trying to find alternative funding to make these things happen. And every community is running into that very thing. So, okay, Council. Tom?
Well, we are making sure that Secretary Fox knows all of our needs and all of our modes, from air to walking.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's good to see that. I'm particularly excited to see the large percentages of pedestrian and bicycle use, and I've been sitting here trying to think, well, how can we get that 57% down below 50% so we can say that the majority of our residents use other modes than just the single occupancy vehicle. And I think that your series of slides on the transit could help us get there, you know, could help move in that direction. I think that there's a lot more we can do with SMART in Moscow, and I look forward to seeing us make those changes. So I'm excited to see that. The only thing that was bugging me in the report, I mentioned this to Dan when I was talking, is the front cover has your logo, and then it has the City of Moscow logo in that order, and it looks like it says no on the front. And it's a tiny minor point that I think it would be more productive if we said on instead of no, but I don't, you know.
We can take ours off if
no, you should leave it on there. You did the work. It's great work. I just, you know, it's just a silly, it's sort of like how when Chevrolet tried to sell the Nova in Mexico, it didn't sell because it says Nova, which means it doesn't work or it doesn't go. That's all.
Well, one of the things, Thomas, I'm kind of interested in is asking if there's any public input, any public comment at this time, and there may be some questions that you could answer as if folks want to come up and speak. So
great.
I'm very willing to listen to anybody from the public. If you want to take 3 minutes, it's not a public hearing, but we're always excited about hearing from people. Come on up, Joanne, and you can address us. You'll have to state, although we all know you need to state your name and address for us, Joanne.
I'm Joanne Manita, 203 South Howard, 1 block off 3rd Street on Howard. And I just got a copy. I was trying to download this, and I couldn't. And I finally, they printed out a copy for me, and it looks quite complex and quite well thought out. But I had to zero in on my neighborhood, which is 3rd Street. And I was kind of distressed to see that you're recommending having a motor vehicle bridge over connecting 3rd with Mountain View. And so I looked at some of the details to see, and it's good that you're anticipating having some traffic slowing devices. And I see that you think that by slowing traffic, you're going to discourage 300 to 500 cars from going up 3rd Street. And I think that may be very optimistic. But I was puzzled because at City Hall, with this new connection, you have 200 more cars. And in Van Buren, just 2 blocks further, you have 600 cars. And I was wondering where those 400 cars were coming from. That's one example of questions I had. You also say that for active and healthy living, that enabling people to drive to Lena Whitmore is a plus. I would say that's a minus for active and healthy living, because having a pedestrian bridge enables people to walk and bike there, which is much better. You talk about quality of life and the concerns of the neighborhood, but then you never address it again, how it's going to be preserved when you have 500 to 1,000 more cars going up 3rd Street. So what I wanted to say is, I went to the open houses. I went to the 2 open houses here, and I went to the one at One World. But I don't think the public has had a chance to see the plan and then ask questions like I am doing right now. I would hate to see you pass it tonight without getting any public input in the plan rather than the process, because we don't know what happened to our questions that we put forth. Mine aren't in here anywhere. And I hope that makes sense, because it's a good plan, but I just think we need some community discussion. So if I have questions like this, and I'm sure other people in my neighborhood will, we have a chance to discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Would you like me to
Well,
address
why don't we wait and see if we got other folks, Thomas, and then I'll let you respond to that. How's that? We'll see. Other folks want to come up and talk about this multimodal transportation plan? Okay, Thomas, I'll let you address this, what Joanne's concerns were.
Yep, thank you. We actually included a few slides on the 3rd Street assessment that we did, anticipating that might be a question from the community, since it's certainly been an important point of discussion. So this has been an issue I know that's been talked about even prior to this plan. We were asked to, again, take a look at the opportunity to create a connection across Paradise Creek at 3rd Street. And we looked at essentially 3 alternatives within the plan, first being just the development of a pedestrian and bicycle-only connection, so a non-vehicular bridge. The second would be what we call full-access multimodal connection, so a bridge with a travel lane, an auto travel lane in each direction, a bike lane, and a full sidewalk in both directions. And then what we call alternative 3, which is that basically that same bridge, but then introducing a series of traffic calming measures into the neighborhood for 6 to 8 blocks to the west of the new bridge connection. So people that did choose to use that would be more likely to do so if they were taking a shorter trip into the neighborhood versus passing all the way through from Mountain View to downtown, for example. I don't know if you can see this. It's a figure 4.3 in your document in Chapter 4. There's a lot of data up here, so I won't talk to it all. But basically what it's showing us is the results of 3 runs of that travel demand model that I talked to you about, which essentially projects the future year, 2035, traffic volumes onto a number of street segments with each of those 3 alternatives in place. So the blue numbers there indicate that alternative 1, which are essentially a proxy for no change to the traffic system. So we're creating a new bike ped connection, but we're not actually changing the traffic flow conditions. Alternative 2 then is the full multimodal connection with no traffic calming. So you can see that's actually probably the alternative that most balances the traffic flow on 3rd Street, as well as important parallel streets to that, 6th and D Street, which actually do act as sort of major east-west traffic connectors today. So what that's actually doing is actually reducing the volume somewhat on those parallel streets, because people aren't having to go quite as far a direction if they're making some of those trips. And then alternative 3 is the full bridge connection with some traffic calming along 3rd Street. So the intent there was we're improving the city street system. We're creating a more robust set of east-west travel options for all modes of travel, but trying to somewhat mitigate the neighborhood that's likely to have the greatest impact, which would be the neighborhood along 3rd there, since they're essentially living on a cul-de-sac today, and they'd be open to a broader part of the city street network if they were to do that. There's clearly some trade-offs there. The option that we took these 3 options forward in our last public open house and got quite a bit of feedback from, at least from the group of people that came to that meeting. The third alternative was the one that we heard the most support for during our public meeting, the full bridge with community traffic calming. There's quite a bit of research and study to show that traffic calming measures such as speed humps, chicanes, mini traffic circles, which are commonly used in places like Portland and Seattle, can actually reduce traffic volumes in the range of 20% or so on that type of street.
Wayne had a question. Wayne?
Well, Tom, while you're on this, I thought it was interesting to see your projections for traffic with the 3 different alternatives. It was 3 or 4 years ago, last May, remember this, we were sitting at a Public Works and Finance Committee meeting, and we were having the ongoing discussion about 3rd Street Bridge. And my question was, I would really like to see a traffic study that tells me how much more traffic would go through the intersection at 3rd and Washington. That's a bottleneck area, and my concern would be that increasing. So I'm glad to see that you did the 3 alternatives. I think it's interesting if you take a look at D Street, and we have an existing at D and Van Buren, existing 6,200 vehicles, and with alternative 1, just a pedestrian bike bridge, that only increases to 6,600 as time goes on. But by going with alternative 3 with a full bridge and traffic calming, it jumps it to 7,200. So I guess the question that we would need to ask ourselves, or staff would have to ask, would be, what would be the goal if we put in a 3rd Street bridge? Is it to reduce the amount of traffic that is on D Street and 6th Street, because 6th Street ends up with the same situation? It actually increases even more because of the traffic calming that's on 3rd Street. And so the question would be, would we want 3rd Street as one of the main east-west arterials, or just a way to get there? But the question I asked 4 years ago is answered. Thank you.
Okay. I think, another thing I would say about this is, while travel demand models are valuable predictive tools for long-term forecasting, they certainly come with a margin of error. And there's a lot of other things that are likely to change over the next 20 years that'll probably have as much impact on how much traffic's on your street as whether you put that that connection in, the price of fuel, behavior patterns of our younger generation, which we see are changing substantially. So,
Walter?
Speaking to Wayne's point, Thomas, I have a problem with your graphic there, in that the colored alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are 20-year projection numbers. We don't have one of these that show current traffic flows and what happens if a bridge of any type or with traffic calming were put in. Which you can't really compare the 7,500 existing cars out here by City Hall with what's going to happen 20 years from now if a ped bike-only bridge is put in, or a full-blown bridge, get out of the way, let me through, or a full-blown bridge and then a fence that says you can't go this way, go the other way. So I would think that we've got apples and oranges here. I would prefer to see one, or maybe 2 charts, one that shows the current volumes and what those current volumes do with the 3 alternatives, and another one that shows the projected 20-year, if no bridge is put in, versus the 3 alternatives. I think that would be more meaningful. Whether or not it would answer Ms. Minetta's questions about volumes or Wayne's comments, I don't know until I see it. I presume you have the data to do that.
Well, one of the beauties of going through the effort and expense to develop the model is now the city has a travel demand model that, anytime you go out to further develop this type of project, you can put that tool into play to run a 20/20 scenario, or you know you can use that to do it just exactly what you're requesting there. So I assume as were this project to advance, you'd want to do some more analysis of the year of opening conditions and exactly how those would play out. So you've got the tool in hand now to do that.
Tom, you hit a kind of an interesting point. You're talking about we don't know in 20 years. Well, I'll tell you what, I think millennials in 20 years are going to be running the show, in my view. And it's going to be kind of interesting how their approach to things really are, because we don't know that. And there's a pretty smart young group coming up underneath that in 20 years. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, we're seeing there's some fascinating trends in the industry with that millennial generation. Auto ownership down almost 30% since the 80s. Percent people getting driver's license down almost 35%. It's a generation that's driven by the technology that's in their hand. Not, like you and I when we grew up, we wanted to get a car when we were 16, right? These guys want to get an iPhone or a Galaxy or whatever and stay connected on it. So having to drive is a nuisance for them.
I'll give you a quick example. I met a kid that was 18 and didn't have a driver's license. I couldn't hardly believe it. Yeah. And I said, you don't have a driver's license? And he really wasn't interested. That eventually he'll get one. Mm-hmm. But the kid biked and stuff. I thought that was just, I'm thinking back, I could not wait till I got behind the wheel of a car to zoom around when I was a young guy. But it's just a different mindset.
And then